For a couple of days, we had no idea what ground truth was. So we were hoping for the best. We knew that one significant building, a residential building, collapsed here in Islamabad. But other than that, damage appeared to be minimal.
I remember on the day after the quake, on the 9th of October, when a Pakistani spokesman was saying that the death toll could be as high as 18,000 dead. A lot of people thought it can't be that bad, and this was 24 hours into it.
Within about 72 hours, I actually got to go up and see the devastation, and it was like nothing you've ever seen. Entire towns that had just been flattened, and people wandering around. You could see the people trailing out of the villages up in the upper elevations, trying to get down to some sort of relief.
Went up to Bagh in Azad Kashmir, Pakistani Kashmir, and flying into Bagh, making the loop around the city, being able to see that it was almost completely gone. This had to be repeated at town after town after town throughout this very inhospitable terrain, just how big of a catastrophe we in the Pakistanis faced.
Musharraf had put out a call for help. Knew a lot of people had died. There's over 1 million people displaced. Come to find out that a confirmed 73,000 to 75,000 people were killed in the earthquake. Central
Command had Rear Admiral Lefevre out here within 48 hours of the earthquake with his Disaster Assistance Center. And USAID had Bill Berger, the head of the Disaster Assistance Response Team, on the ground at almost exactly the same moment.
I was told, bring in a small force, pack light, pack ready. You're going to go in and do the initial assessments, and then you're going to take over all the U.S. forces to flow in to support the government of Pakistan. Our helicopters from Afghanistan already had come over the horizon, and that very next day we're already making the initial relief flights up in country and bringing back casualties.
You weren't prepared for what you were going to see till you actually saw the towns and the people that you would run into as you were delivering supplies. So really, words couldn't describe, you know, just that sheer devastation and the need of the people there as you went up to these remote villages.
Swarms of people would start swarming the helicopter, and you'll see scenes where helicopter literally had to hover and we had to push the stuff out of the back and then go to a safer area to bring on the casualties.
Within 48 hours, our forces in Afghanistan who were conducting stability operations, conducting combat operations, were able to disengage forces, fly through the Khyber Pass, be set up here in the southern Kashmirs, and conducting a very, very aggressive humanitarian assistance, disaster relief operation. There's no other military in the world that can do that.
So it was key and vital to be expeditionary, to be self-sustaining, and get as close to the devastated region as possible. The pack mill responded beautifully of getting up into the area, marching into areas that were impassable by roads to be able to do the assessment of what damages and feed that information back so that we could get a good handle and respond to the needs of the government of Pakistan. And as you would imagine, in a humanitarian assistance with this much devastation, it was hospitals and engineers that they needed foremost. Thousands of hospitals and medical units were destroyed. For example, up in Muzaffarabad, where they asked us initially to put our first hospital, there was only essentially one hospital standing. So that became our first priority, get a hospital up there as quickly as possible. It was kind of interesting because at the same time we were only allowed about 4 flights in a night into the airport because of all the international relief. The MASH hospital has 17 C-17 loads of aircraft to bring it in. And so we were carefully metering it because what we wanted was a capability right away, set up and be able to operate. We knew we needed an engineering capability because of the massive rubble and the roads that were closed. The call was made to take some equipment, the bulldozers, the backhoes, the things that we knew we needed right away to help clear areas. So at the same time that equipment was coming in through the seaport, we had a 110 flyaway team Seabees from NMB 74. They married up with the equipment. We moved them up, co-located them in Muzaffarabad, the capital, along with the MASH hospital, and be able to go out, reach out to the roads that were feeding into the two main valleys, Jhelum and Neelam Valley, and clear rubble.
We accomplished so much in so little time. The aviation ops ran from sunrise to sunset every day, plus all the cargo was coming in at night. All of the supplies would come off the aircraft and immediately get loaded into stockpiles that were surrounded all over the airport. And then they would hand load the aircraft for deployment, flying them out into the mountains. So it was very impressive the amount of relief supplies that were being delivered in that short, immediate response time after the disaster.
Our job was to go in there and start to help unclog the airport, because for 4 days, international relief had been flowing in there on 747s, DC-10s, and the Pakistanis were just putting it in the corners of the ramp, and the place was filling up.
I remember out there, sort of the end of the first week, standing there with Admiral Lefevre and the commander of the AEG, and looking at a undifferentiated mountain of relief supplies, just jammed up everywhere. And the AEG said, "Sir, if the Pakistanis will just give us the permission to attack that, we can sort it out." Well, they got that permission, and within a week, that mountain was gone. If they hadn't been there with their equipment, but especially their know-how in how to do this, we would have had a situation in which relief supplies came in, simply clogged the airhead, and never got out into the earthquake zone, and it would have been a disaster within a disaster.
The first missions were all internal loads, in which we would load the aircraft all the way as full as we could within limitations, weight limitations, and we'd go land in a field, and a bunch of people would come out and literally take the food out of our hands.
The air crews were absolutely marvelous. Incredible to watch those crews respond in a mission that was so heartwarming to watch. We would land in a very controlled landing zone, offload the supplies with the help of the Pak military and the elders in the villages, and then as the plane emptied, we would then load on casualties. Up to this point already is over 3,700 casualties were loaded on.
Look at it in the aggregate at the end of the day. You probably saved countless lives.
The MASH, of course, got set up very quickly. Was on the ground within 3 weeks of the devastating earthquake.
When we came in, it was pretty austere. Even though there was, buildings and structures, you could see that there was a lot of devastation. And the people were homeless. I mean, there were a lot of homeless people here.
It's amazing to see the amount of suffering, the amount of injuries. There was just a lot of work to be done.
We were doing about 10 surgeries per day on average for the first month. For the first couple weeks, it was really hard. I had to kind of separate myself emotionally at one point, because every time I talked to a patient, they'd tell me, my broken arm doesn't hurt as much as my heart.
We wanted to make sure that we had health care in both provinces, so we set up, with the cooperation and direction of the Pakistan government, set up a hospital outside of Shikari, and that too, immediately upon arrival, was set up, able to operate, seeing patients, and did again a marvelous job.
The really bad earthquake injuries peaked in the middle of November and then started to decline, and then we started seeing more primary care patients. The preventive medicine team on the outreach missions vaccinated nearly 5,000 individuals, children, adults, both men and women, and young kids.
Some of the neatest experiences for me out here were the patients after we had done the surgery and we're getting ready to discharge them. They want to give you a hug. They want to take a picture with you, and you know that you've impacted their life.
So to bring a MASH, a level 3+ medical capability, kind of a Boston General Hospital, into the remote regions of the Kashmir province and provide that kind of service was a huge thing. In initial assessments, most relief efforts usually last anywhere from 30 to 60 days. So our initial assessment was, okay, you'll be on the ground for about 30 or 60 days.
Pakistan looked at this as two disasters. One, the earthquake, and two, the impending winter after the earthquake. We didn't even think about the winter when this was initially kicked off. But as time progressed and we realized the devastation, that winter was coming around the corner and there was still so much work to be done.
There was a figure anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 million people that were displaced out of their homes. Either their homes were crumbled or unsafe to live in. The CBs were an interesting group. They were on deployment out of Okinawa. This unit happened to be NMCB 74 out of Gulfport, Mississippi. Some of these same kids lost their homes in Hurricane Katrina.
We've seen destroyed buildings. We've completed demolition. We've removed the rubble. We've also built temporary housing facilities and temporary school facilities so that they can continue on with their lives.
We're helping out the Pakistani people. Up at the villages where we work, it breaks my heart to see the kids, and the kids really play on me. And I think they play on my troops too. When you see them, you know why we're doing this. We're doing it for the kids. We're building the schools, and they call it Miyandi Bundy Boys High School because Miyandi Bundy is the tribal village.
It's an isolated village. It's way up in the mountains. They had nothing. They didn't even have a tent set up for one of their schools. We were able to give these children somewhere to go to school.
And so we went up there and built what we call Southeast Asia huts, SEAHUTS.
So between the two battalions, we had built 3 brand new schools for these children. If we didn't build their school, they had nowhere else to go to school for probably years to come before they got another school built. So these people have had a lot of tragedy, and just to give them one little piece of normalcy is a big deal to them.
All people, children, young kids, older adults, they're all pitching in to help remove rubble, to rebuild houses. It's been an amazing feat that they're doing here.
Years from now, they'll remember us, and they'll remember the compassion that we showed. And I think that's why we're doing this, is for the kids.
The Chinooks was absolutely the symbol, and continues to this day as a symbol of relief. Very visible in the skies over Islamabad, carrying loads of supplies and relief to people that had no idea what it was all about.
The most visible, obviously, was the helicopter effort, and that literally saved thousands of lives. With over 3,500 casualty evacuations in total, and a number of those literally life-saving, that kind of became the poster emblem of the U.S. relief effort.
At one point, they probably carted over 70% of the supplies, people, up into the affected region. Now, as you see it, as it evolved, sling load operations to deliver food and non-food items and items that they will need to rebuild their homes.
For every internal load that we had to perform, we would have to shut down and hand load the aircraft. It'd slow you down significantly. It would take 35, 45 minutes to load an aircraft. Now with the sling loads, we've actually probably quadrupled in a day what we can actually move.
The morning, early morning, the pack mill and World Food Program guys would load all the nets. The Marines would hook them up for us, and the Chinooks would just come in and hook up the sling and move out to forward sites here and just do a big rotation cycle all day long. So our pilots would leave here at 7 o'clock in the morning and come back 8 hours later, because that's how much flight time we could put on each aircraft.
When we first got here, the main concern was there were still roads that were blocked, and it was essential for the helicopters to make it to those areas where they did not have to go refuel back in Islamabad.
We literally tripled the sortie rate and tripled the tonnage that we were getting into the affected areas by establishing these forward operating bases and these rapid refueling ports. So the helos would come in from all nations, hot refuel if they had the capability, or cold refuel, load up supplies and immediately go down the valleys and save over an hour of time that would have normally been required in the initial stages of it, fly all the way back to Chocolate to get gas, to get the relief supplies, and then push forward.
We've conducted military-to-military training with the PAC Mill. We did training with the 51st Supply and Transportation Battalion, which is headquartered out of Islamabad.
So we did a lot of hands-on, a lot of talk-through method. A lot of it was the hands-on, so they can touch it and grab it and connect it together and get the concept, grasp the concept a little bit easier.
Anyone who has worked with the Pakistani military comes away with a very high opinion of their commitment and their professional capability.
Once we pull out, we will leave our fueling equipment behind so they can continue on.
We'll have been here for approximately 6 months when we leave. It's the largest and longest relief effort in military history.
So as we're pulling out, it's really neat to watch as the buildup of the capacity to now get into that mode as the winter's starting to abate, to be able to get and rebuild and as the President Musharraf said, to build back better than what they had.
The way I see it is that the U.S. military has paved the way for USAID now to take over. The work that you have done in the military by going into communities where we couldn't have gotten to without you, and by opening up roads, that you've made it possible now for USAID to come into those same areas and work very quickly and effectively.
We've always been concerned about the first snowfall and how that was going to impact people. When the first snowfall came, we felt fairly comfortable. People weren't moving out of the mountains, but then we had another snowfall that was very large, and we were very concerned about how people were going to survive. As soon as the weather broke, you saw 2 Chinooks flying over, and everybody, we had all been so worried about the weather and the interruption to the supply lines, and everybody at once turned their eyes toward those 2 Chinook helicopters, and there was just a sort of spontaneous cheer that went up. It meant that we were back in business again.
We had the opportunity, at the request of the government of Pakistan, if we could help in this rebuild reconstruction by allowing some of our equipment to stay behind. They were so overwhelmingly impressed by our MASH unit, its capabilities, that they specifically asked for a hospital unit like a MASH, and we were able to give them. In fact, it was the last MASH. Many of these areas in this 100 by 300 kilometer swath of destruction was devastated and will require rubble removal that only these heavy bulldozers and dump trucks and backhoes can support. So we were able to leave up to 30 pieces of equipment behind as well. I think the legacy of this operation will be how quick and overwhelming the response was from the U.S. government. We did a lot, and I think everybody can be very proud of what they did.
All of the U.S. assets came together as one team in support of the Pakistan government, and I think it made a huge difference.
When you look at how many people have survived, how many houses have been rebuilt, I say undoubtedly that we've probably saved or kept 200,000, 300,000 people alive at least.
We can show you all the numbers of what we did, the patients, the amount of rubble that we moved, the number of flights, the number of sorties. It does only tell part of it.
Seeing Chinooks with us underslung loads coming in and people congregating, around the space where it was to touch down, and the hope they would see in the eyes of the affectees that the saviors have come. One would always remember such expression of people.
We became more of friends rather than working partners, and I hope and pray that this relationship will continue.
Your need was just in time, which we say that friend in need is a friend indeed. So US proved to be our friends at this moment.
I just couldn't be prouder of the individuals and of the team they formed. From day one right through to today, the people have been fantastic.
I think this is probably the most rewarding experience. I think it has more impact than anything else I've done.
I remember taking a helicopter mission up to Paras, a town in the northwest frontier that was completely isolated. We took out a number of casualties on the return flight, and I remember in particular one family, when we got back to the town of Montserrat, where they had extended family and where they were going to get hospital care. The father came up and said something to me, and it was translated by a Pakistani safety pilot. He just said, "Thank you, America."
In a time of need, when people's homes and lives were devastated, the United States was there, and it was quite an honor to be a part of it.